Okay, good evening. Tonight we're going to look at Unit 4, Cognition, and tonight's Language and Thought, the first part. So we'll look at how do we communicate. And really this part of what we learn about is, in psychology, is all about communication. It's all about how do we use language and thought in a way that gives us some insight into how people behave and how their mind functions and works. So it's all about communication. This is a question we will ask in class, or we've already discussed in class, and it is a question that asks you this: at what level is the statement above ambiguous? Curious blue ideas sleep furiously. So at this point, if you haven't done this already in class, I'd pause the video, write down some thoughts in your notes. How is this ambiguous? And I'll give you a little hint here. You need to know this for the test. It's on your test, this exact question. So take a minute to investigate this and then come back and we'll tell you how and why it's ambiguous. Okay, curious blue ideas sleep furiously. This is an ambiguous statement in this way. It is semantically ambiguous, which means that, well, meaning is semantics. So the meaning of the statement is unclear. You're not sure. Semantics is all about linguistics and the logical, process of concerning the meaning of language. Ambiguous means you're unclear about what something exactly means because a choice between alternatives hasn't been made, or you're just not certain what's going on there. So what does this even mean then? Curious blue ideas sleep furiously. The statement is a proper statement of English. Curious blue ideas sleep furiously, that works. I mean, you can't make a claim that that's an improper sentence structurally. Or a better way to say this is like, if you're in English class and you're going to diagram out the sentence, the diagramming of the sentence would work. You've got subject-verb agreement, all those kinds of things. Adjectives in there describing things. So the problem is, at each level that you look at this, what is curious blue? I mean, you've probably never heard of that before. What's a curious blue? I don't know. What's a blue idea? Maybe you could say a blue idea would be like somebody being sad, or an idea of sadness, but that doesn't really make much sense either. How many times have you heard that put together as a combination? How about ideas sleep? That certainly doesn't happen very often. And sleep furiously, unless maybe you're thinking back to like REM disorders we've talked about before, where someone's, moving when they shouldn't be moving in their sleep. That would be furious movement. But this is ambiguous because semantically, there isn't any meaning with it. This is something that the famous cognitive scientist, linguist, really famous person who thinks a lot and a great writer, prolific writer, who we'll discuss here later in this unit. He brought this up and discussed it because, and it's one of these rare quotations, and I think his was curious green ideas or something like that. It was a little bit differently stated, but it's one of these ideas that linguists will look at to try to think of and determine how do we use language. So these are other questions that don't really have answers. What's the opposite of a duck? How much does Thursday weigh? Do curious blue ideas sleep furiously? What's the name of Snow White's father? It wasn't mentioned, was it? How about if you could travel back in time 100 years, where would you live? Can you even do that? Probably not. Have you stopped beating your pet? That's a really good one, because if you answer no to that question, this doesn't have an answer, because if you answer no, that means you have been beating your pet and you still are. If you answer yes, that means you stopped the process of beating your pet and that you had beaten your pet before. If you substitute pet and wife in there, have you stopped beating your wife yet? These are the kind of questions that, linguists would look at and people studying language and say, what does this mean? And you could really catch somebody with an inappropriate answer there pretty easily. This has to do with like ideas that we express but don't have clear meaning. Let's talk about what language is. is the complex communication system that involves the use of abstract symbols, and it conveys unlimited messages. How can language convey meaning about things that haven't happened yet? And human language does this. We are able to do this, what I should say. So we can convey meaning about things that have not occurred yet, things that happened in the past that we can reflect upon, and we can look forward to things that haven't even happened yet and imagine what those things could be. It gives us the ability to do it. Because of this, we can transcend time and space with language, and we have an unlimited ability to communicate ideas. Other mammals and other animals on this planet do not have the ability to communicate in this complex of fashion. So this makes us special. These switchboard operators in the past are trying to connect people with the proper place, and switchboard operator kittens aggravated that you're with your wire shenanigans. I guess people that struggle with communication may do so because they're having trouble connecting what should work and get meaning or semantic meaning out of ideas, linguistically or otherwise. But language is an amazing gift, and it distinguishes us as humans from other species. It is definitely essential to human cooperation. We need to use language to be able to solve problems, especially the kinds that are more difficult as a species to deal with. Language is mysterious. We're not really sure how it started, how it evolved, and how it changed, but it has over time, and people have studied this to try to figure out the phenomenon of language. And language is definitely central to human life. So I guess what I'm trying to tell you is this. Should we be studying language in psychology? Absolutely. This is a very important part of the course, but I'll kind of warn the AP students that there aren't going to be many questions coming from this section on the AP test. Maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 at the most. But still, I think language is really something we take for granted, and something we maybe shouldn't take for granted, because it can teach us a lot about what human behavior is about. It's really, as Steven Pinker says, and we'll talk about here, is it's a window into the human soul, into the human mind. But language has been around in every society ever found. There's not been a society without a language. There's been around 6,000 different languages found. In the two maps there on the side, you've got the indigenous peoples of North America. So those are each of those places that you see with a color area. Those are different areas where unique languages were spoken. Man has an instinctive tendency to speak, as we see in the babble of young children, while no child has an instinctive tendency to bake, to brew, or to write. And this is a Charles Darwin quote. And what it means is that we all kind of have language that's a foundation of being a human being, yet writing that language isn't necessarily that important, and we didn't do that for a long time on this planet. And brewing and baking aren't certainly things that are super important to human existence, although you can make a case for both as being kind of nice pastimes to do. But what can studying language help us understand about human behavior and the human mind? I think there's a lot to understand, and there are a lot of breakthroughs to be made here in the thinking through it. So again, certainly there will be some things that we discuss in these series of notes on language and thought and cognition and decision making, which is what this section's about. That will be on your test for this unit, which is also going to consider things like memory and also intelligence. But AP test wise, things are a lot more condensed. There's only 100 questions, and you think, well, that's a lot of questions. But if you look at all the different units we're studying, all the different chapters of those units, there's a lot involved here. So don't get too concerned with the details here, but hopefully you have a better understanding of how we use language. So let's look at it again here. Let's eat grandma, or let's eat grandma. Punctuation saves lives. It certainly does for grandma's sake. And she could get run over by a reindeer too. We have to be careful, especially as Christmas is approaching. Writing is not the same as spoken language. So We do not have an instinctive tendency to write, as Darwin mentioned it there before, but we learn it in school and we're taught it as a way to function. We have descriptive grammar, which everybody's pretty familiar with. You're describing things. And then there's prescriptive grammar. Many of these rules make absolutely no sense at all. We just agree to use them. They're prescriptive. They're what society has told us we need to do. Descriptive grammar is just what we would use to survive in the world. A good example of prescriptive grammar would be split infinitives. To go boldly where no man has gone before. That's, of course, the quote from Captain James T. Kirk of the USS Enterprise from Star Trek. And if you look at the rule for split infinitives, the described prescriptive grammar rule for that, he should have said something more like this: to go boldly where no man has gone before. That seems strange now when we're looking at it in reverse. To boldly go where no man's gone before, it just seems to roll a little bit better. And I think James T. Kirk right there would probably agree. Does it mean anything that it's not? I mean, I think we can get caught up in grammar and grammar rules, and we'll look at some of them as sort of a fun thing to do, and maybe it's a window into the behavior and the ideas behind the people that use them and the psychology of them, but it's not like a main idea of language. Double negatives are another good example. I can't get no satisfaction. That's Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones. Should he have said, I can't get any satisfaction? We would probably think it's I can't get any satisfaction, but both are double negatives. Can't get any and can't get no is the same thing. Why do we focus so much on saying I can't get any? The reason is just because of the development of language, how it has evolved and developed over time. And it has to do with the fact that they did say things like I can't get no in northern parts of the British Isles there. But since England became kind of the power capital of that territory, they're more used colloquial English, or Anglish as it was, ended up winning out over time, and it was decided upon that we should talk in this way. It's interesting, isn't it, that we have such different or diverse ways of looking at it, but language is a gift regardless of whether you're agreeing upon these ways of saying grammar or not. So if you got some grammar Nazis maybe in your house or your class, or you get some English teachers that are pretty rough on you, take some solace or feel a little bit better in that fact that you're not completely wrong. This is a great video, of course, from Vsauce. You can check it out yourself. I'm not going to play it here, of course, but where does English come from? And it shows you sort of the background of what I'm discussing here, the evolutionary aspect, the changing nature of language as it's forming. And we'll definitely see that as we go through these videos on this. So it's an amazing gift. Socrates said, wisdom begins in wonder. A couple things we need to wonder about is that language is not thought. So do we have to have language to think? I think most people, when they first consider this, may think, oh yeah, we think with language, but we don't. We have sophisticated cognition, cause and effect. We think of objects and intentions of others without really using speech. Babies don't speak at first, but yet they can think, can't they? Animals like chimps using sign language help to show that they were thinking, and we could get to the bottom of that once they started to use language, but they were thinking before they had language. At times we think without language, like spatial relations are a good example. Maybe if you're solving the Rubik's Cube, are you using language to do that? I wouldn't think so. We have an understood, implied, or tacit knowledge to understand language. Cognitive Psych has shown us that long-term memory remembers the gist rather than the exact form of the word. So as I'm speaking here, your memory is organizing this in a way that's going to remember the overall understanding of it and not the little details. That's probably why you need to take notes. We don't reproduce entire sentences in our mind. What we do is we take the abstract, we take the meaning and the context, the semantics behind it, and then move on. So it'd be kind of cool if you could put that collar on your dog, though, and find out what they're thinking. I know what my dog would be thinking. Donuts. Language is an amazing gift. Let's continue with this a little bit more. So our study of behavior and of language, will show us some behavior, how it pertains to the human behavior and the human mind. It is important because it's going to show us maybe if we can understand the words that are coming out of someone's mouth, maybe we understand some of what their thought process is. We can't see all of it, obviously. We are not going to delve into written language because that's a different form of language. It's not necessarily as important to show behavior and thought process. We're not going to delve too deeply into proper grammar, although we'll look at some of it just for some fun. We are not going to delve too deeply into thought because that's sort of what we've already done as we looked at cognition. And what language is doing, we're going to specify language and look at that here today. Language can definitely impact thought, though. And it can impact the perceptions of a person who fumbles and the perceptions of a person. As you're looking at someone, they're fumbling with syntax or grammar or rules and they're not speaking very well. You can have maybe a negative viewpoint of them, or maybe a positive one if they're speaking your type of colloquial or local language. Language is really three different things. First thing is words, our own personal dictionary that makes up this sort of lexicon or understanding of the world around us. It's rules in language. You've got syntax, which is assigned to explain what sentences should be assembled like. You've got morphology, the rules created to put together words, so creating words from smaller portions. And you've got phonology, the rules to combine vowels and consonant into smaller words. And we'll look at both of those for sure. But interfaces are also important, the methods that we use to communicate. So language is those three things. We're not going to really delve into written language, proper grammar, or thought quite as much. So language, amazing gift, isn't it? I don't know what a word means. Have to look it up in the dictionary. I know a lot of my students are like, oh, I'll just skip that one. I won't look it up. It'll be okay. It's not okay because one word may change the entire meaning of a sentence to the point where you think it means one thing and it turns out it means something absolutely different. So you have to be very careful there. Research studies have shown that typical high school graduate has a vocabulary of about 60,000 words. That's pretty amazing. So how many words is that? That's about one new word every 2 hours starting from the age of 2. Or the age of 1, sorry. That's pretty intense. We have an amazing memory. And think back to our study of memory. And I'll be back in just a second. We'll talk about it some more. I'm coming, Griff. Hang on a minute. Okay, so now right there was the perfect example. My dog's at the back window, or back door, and he's standing there. It's what he does. He tells me he needs to go out by standing at the door, which is great unless I'm not back here at the door. Now, if he could speak to me and talk like we looked at here earlier, then we'd be in with something. I mean, but I guess I could train him to do that too, but he doesn't usually do it. There are 4 basic communication skills. We've got thinking, listening, nonverbal communication skills, and then speaking. So we'll look at a little bit of each of those. Let's first look here at Steven Pinker. He is someone that I based a lot of the beginning part of this off of, and it's off of a lecture that he gives that's fantastic, really. If you want to understand language in a deeper way, I really suggest that you take a look at it. Plus, you get a chance to look at his hair, too. But he's a Harvard psychology professor at this point, and he focuses on cognitive science. He's a linguistic person in a way, because he specializes in verbs. And he conducts research and writes popular science, whether it's novels or the books. There's a bunch of them listed at the bottom there. You can see most of them are about thoughts or the instinct of language, how the mind works. One that I've been reading, and I think it's down there, How the Mind Works is in red there. I have the version that looks like this, How the Mind Works by Steven Pinker. It is a long book, but it is totally incredible. I mean, it's a really, really good read. And you see examples here of some of the things that we've been looking at in psychology. This is the kind of book where if you really like psychology and you want to understand how people behave the way that they do and why they decide the things that they do, as or going about life. This is the kind of a book that gives you a chance to understand how the mind does work. He really does a good job of pulling together the ideas of all the other folks who've worked in these fields, and of course inserts some of his own, but he's very good at succinctly taking those ideas and then also giving it back to people who are listening in a way that they can understand it and use it. So The Stuff of Thought was one of his books that really helped explore how language can look into human nature. Several aspects of language, like swearing and its origins, and how cathartic swearing is rooted in evolution, how it was needed. So he's kind of a very proper speaking person when you hear Steven Pinker talk. But yet he'll discuss some things that are pretty off the wall, and you wouldn't expect him to be discussing them, like swearing. This leads to taboo words. Why are some words acceptable and some words just aren't? And the language of seduction, how metaphors are invasive in our language, and also the use of politeness and doublespeak. These are all things he gets involved with The Stuff of Thought. Not a book I've read yet, but I want to look into that one as we go here. Here is a real good quick clip from YouTube about the fact that Pinker thinks that language is a window into the mind, and why he thinks it's so important and why he likes to study it. And then this is about an hour-long lecture. It's one of those pretty cool white background lectures where he walks you through how language functions and how it works, and how it is a window into understanding the brain and the mind and human behavior. So that's fantastic right there. It's almost like a semester course boiled down into an hour. It's pretty intense. So, and some of what we have looked at so far in the notes is based off of that. I want to give credit where credit's due there. Let's look at the parts of speech and where we get words and how they function. A phoneme is, in spoken language, the smallest distinctive sound unit. So an example of that would be chug. Has 3 phonemes. Ch, g. You might think of them as syllables, but they're not always syllables. But morphemes are a little different too. In a language, the smallest unit that carries meaning. So this can be a small word or a prefix or suffix, like cat, walk, in, or able. And if you look at the bottom there, you're going to see where the tip of the tongue is placed for T, and where the vocal cords will vibrate for D. If you get my picture there, you see how I'm doing that. This person will take you through the articulation of phonemes. It's very interesting to watch her speak with her mouth moving and saying the different phonemes. They sound strange when you're just saying phonemes instead of the words that make them up. So let's look at the structure of language. It's a multi-layered process. We've got phonemes, which are the smallest units in language, and all the letters of the alphabet are phonemes. In English, we produce all of the unique sounds that we're able to make by combining about 40 to 50 unique phonemes together. In other languages, they make do with less, like in Hawaiian, they only have 30 phonemes. Here we come to save the day. It's the mighty morphemes, or mighty mouse, I'm not sure, but they're the smallest unit of meaning, like we mentioned, cat and walk. Also prefixes and suffixes. So if we add the letter S to a cat, we now have 2 morphemes, cat and S. If we add ing to walk, we have 2 morphemes, walk and ing. Unbreakable is 3 morphemes, unbreakable. And what this does is it pulls together the little parts of the words and the language that we speak, and hopefully that's helpful. This is the McGurk effect. We've probably looked at this with sensation and perception, but again, I think it's important to see, because the formation of the mouth and how the mouth and the diaphragm and the vocal cords, how that's all kind of propelled through these clicks, hums, hisses, and sound that vibrates out of me. It's an amazing thing that you'll be watching this video and making any kind of sense out of that when you consider it's just a bunch of noise, really. It's just sound waves that I'm pushing out of my chest and mouth and nose, and you're listening to it, and making sense of it, and I'm communicating to you. It's pretty amazing. But the McGurk effect is a bit of a trick on that, where you'll get the feel that he is saying something different than he actually is, but then they're doing the whole lips thing. You probably saw that in class, but you can watch it again if you're not sure. Grammar is a system of rules used in language. And like we said, we're not going to look at this a whole lot, but we're going to stop grammar time and look at it real quickly. Semantics is the way we understand meaning from the context of their morphemes and their context. So adding an S to the end refers to more than one. This makes sense. Words can have different meanings depending on the placements in a sentence or the context of the sentence. I'm dying. Okay, if someone said that, it can have very different meanings. It could mean that, hey, a person is bleeding and on the ground and they are literally dying. I am literally dying here. I'm dying. Or it could be a person preparing for their first middle school dance. I am dying. I'm so nervous. I'm dying. It's funny how we use language in that way, because we don't literally mean that, but I guess in some way we are communicating that we're desperate in that way. So Pittsburghese is probably something I'll show you in class, but this is my native tongue. If you were to come with me to Pittsburgh and we were to go downtown to go to Isleys and get chip tam, and maybe go over there to the point in that, and maybe then go over across the bridge and watch the Steeler game and that. Afterwards we can go down to John Eagle. That's Pittsburghese, and I can't explain it to you. It's something you have to experience. It's a special little part of the world that has developed its own little dialect. Yins guys maybe not understand that. Instead of saying y'all, they say yins. Very different. I guess the plural is yinses or yinses. I can't explain it. I grew up there. I still don't quite understand how all that happened, but it did. Language is fascinating, and just here in Houston, we don't really say pop or soda. We're much more likely to say soda, but when we say pop, most people say Coke, and they'll say, "Yeah, give me a Coke," and then someone will say, "Okay, what kind do you want?" "Oh, give me a Dr. Pepper." So we think in Houston almost like the word Coke means soft drink. Which means a lot. I think it shows you how popular Coca-Cola is. But we're a Dr. Pepper state. It was made, in Waco and made here. So I think it's interesting. But let's look at another spot here. Language is constructed from phonemes, morphemes, phrases, and sentences, but by following the explicit or implicit rules for the encoding and understanding of information contained in language, humans can manipulate and communicate ideas. Even unspoken languages like the American Sign Language, ASL, allow for complex conceptual thinking, like the first one there is cat. What do you think the second symbols are that he's showing you there? That, of course, is play. It looks like hang loose to me, but maybe you go to Hawaii and play. And the last one is longhorn, or cow. So there you go. Pretty interesting. The thinking process, concepts, mental imagery, propositions, language, the information is stored in taxonomies, networks, schemas, scripts, and cognitive maps. And this is like the stuff that's in your brain that you use all the time. Thought processes include reasoning and problem solving and decision making. These are all really important to understand when you are somebody looking at studying psychology. Good problem solvers are either going to consciously or unconsciously follow a series of steps designed to identify and then evaluate potential solutions or goal approaches. And we make decisions in different ways, don't we? At the bottom there, he says, I struggle with my laziness. I'm like, should I sit down and do nothing or lie down and do nothing? And then the other one says, you ever have so much time you just decide to take a nap? You ever have so much to do, you just sit down and take a nap? My mic was in the way there. I wasn't looking at it right. And the look on his face is pretty cool above him. Every book you've ever read is the combination of 26 different letters. It is kind of amazing, isn't it, when you think about it? Here's Pinker again where he's going to be looking at language, how it reveals human nature. It's 30 minutes. I'm only giving you these as an option to let you know there's more to language than just what might be on the test or just what might be on the AP test, certainly. But Pinker's an interesting guy to think about with this. He expresses himself pretty well with it. And that's the end for tonight for this one. I want to remind you we've got a couple more presentations on language here yet. So the next one we'll look at more, this was kind of communication. The next one will look more at just the fact that we're going to use language in different ways. And the third way will be more of a cognition and how we communicate and use it in terms of work. Like how does it play out? How does it function in everyday life? So we'll do 3 quick video clips on this. This is the first one here. And we'll see you next time. Until then, don't forget to be awesome.